Welcome to Murder with Friends, the show where friends get together and talk about the darker sides of history. I'm your host, Grace Baldridge, and you are watching another Campfire edition. These episodes are group discussions over a theme, and the theme for this week is the crimes of Lifetime. The cases that we will be discussing today have all been adapted into Lifetime original movies. So Jason, what are Lifetime original movies for someone that is unfamiliar with the genre?
They're terrible. No, okay. Just kidding. Lifetime, seriously, Lifetime original movies are these condensed movies of events that have happened that are like heinous or shocking or salacious or sensationalized. They do a pretty good job of really in a short period of time taking you through the events that happen, but when you're watching them, they're either from an opinion or a viewpoint of feeling for the victim or having complete disdain for the what would be the antagonist, would be the evil person, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a narrative.
Exactly. So it depends on what we're watching. They're super successful. People attach and binge watch the hell out of these because here in America and more importantly across the world, we love things that are sensationalized. And Lifetime, that's what they built their network on.
And one very well-received Lifetime movie from 1991 was Love, Lies, and Murder. It was the story of Linda Brown, who was murdered by her stepdaughter, Cinnamon Brown, but was coerced into doing so by her dad, David Brown,
yes,
because Linda's sister, Patty Brown, wouldn't kill Linda, so there's so much to get into and it's really confusing, and this was a movie that the four of us watched together. So just to help us get the conversation going, because I know we were all very confused watching this movie, I found an article from the Los Angeles Times from 1990 that does a better job of breaking down this case than the entire 2-hour movie did in 2 paragraphs. Here we go. A millionaire computer entrepreneur accused of persuading his 14-year-old daughter to kill his wife and then take sole responsibility for it was found guilty Friday of first-degree murder for financial gain. David Brown, whose deadly plot to collect his wife's life insurance has already spawned a motion picture and book deal, was convicted of persuading his daughter Cinnamon to kill her stepmother, 24-year-old Linda Marie Brown, in the belief that as a juvenile she would probably not go to jail. The daughter served nearly 4 years in custody before telling authorities that her father, the 37-year-old Anaheim-based data recovery owner, had put her up to the 1985 crime. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what happened, because this movie sure as hell doesn't.
My big thing with the movie is that it drops a huge bombshell like in the last act. You know what I mean? Because at the very end, you find out that he had a relationship with one of his daughters previous, and that probably was one of the reasons that he murdered his wife. It was to be with his daughter, and they don't tell us that.
It was to be with his wife's sister.
His wife's sister, who's like his daughter, who's underage at the time Patty
was 11 years old when she alleged that David began molesting her and abusing her, and she would actually end up marrying David
just a few years after the murder.
But first, let's just tell you what happened the night of the murder as best as we can piece together. So Linda Brown is shot at point blank range by her daughter, Cinnamon Brown. Stepdaughter, Cinnamon Brown. And Cinnamon Brown shoots her twice, and then Cinnamon is found about a day or so, or the following morning, in the literal doghouse in the yard, and she's thrown up all over herself, and she has what I think David had intended to be a lethal amount of drugs in her system and a suicide note, but she's not dead. She is taken into custody, and in the suicide note, she admits that she did kill her stepmother and that she's sorry for it. And she serves 3 years behind bars. And then around this time, she starts speaking with authorities and saying, you know what? It was all kind of blurry. It was all kind of fuzzy. I was 14 years old. But my father was the reason why I killed my stepmother. So then authorities are like, well, this is kind of weird. Can you get this? Can you get him to say this? And so through a number of jailhouse recordings and just them bugging a whole lot of stuff and investigating David, they realized that the plot to kill Linda was absolutely a conspiracy between David, Patty, and Cinnamon. So There's that.
With David, the master manipulator.
David being the master
Right.
manipulator over Cinnamon, who was 14, and Patty, who was 17 at the time.
Yeah.
The investigator Newell had been, so the case, Cinnamon had gone away to the youth authority. And then the people who were prosecuting weren't quite ready to let it go. So they realized they had to wait for a certain amount of time for Cinnamon to be of age to actually, and for things to kind of blow over before they can go back in and reopen the case. One of the things that really tipped him off was after he received the insurance money, because that was the whole reason why they were going to kill the wife, is because she had close to $1 million in life insurance is looming over her head that he would collect. They had started living lavishly, spending and being really reckless with the money he got from killing his wife. So that prompted him to go back and be like, okay, Cinnamon, can we talk again? Something's not right here. Are you ready to actually talk? And in that time, it was enough time for her to grow and move away from the actual event. She had been in school. She had this whole new life, I guess, behind bars. And she had a come to Jesus moment. It was like, I am ready to talk.
Well, and also it's so warped what David had sort of led her to believe. He was incredibly manipulative. So I don't really think, from what I have read, that he said that this was for the money. He said that Linda was trying to kill him or was plotting to kill him, and that if you really love me, you will kill Linda so that I don't die. And also he assured Cinnamon that because of her age, that she would likely just be put in a psychiatric ward and that she'd be able to get out in a couple of years. And I actually think he did believe that. Although I also think that he tried to kill her. Like, it looks like the drugs that were in her system were intended to kill her, but she threw them up, which is really fortunate, because otherwise we may never have known the truth. You know, she would have just taken it to her grave. So that sort of is a summary of the actual case, but there is a lot more to get into. But first, let's take a look at this trailer for this weird-ass movie.
The most shocking family crime of our time.
I thought you loved me.
I love you.
And just do what I say.
Now the real story of how it happened.
Don't make me do it.
A young mother is murdered in her sleep. Her teenage stepdaughter confesses to the crime.
My daughter's mine.
It seemed like an open and shut case.
Daddy, I'm scared.
But it was just the beginning.
I still don't want to believe a little girl like this could do that.
You could be in jail for the rest of your life.
I always do what you tell me to do.
You know Patty and the dead girl are sisters? He collected almost $1 million in insurance on his dead wife.
The incredible mystery of two teenage girls and the father who manipulated them both.
Prove to me that you love me.
Why are you doing this to me? I'll make up whatever you want.
How many more versions of this story can there be?
And the story of how they fought back.
Who the hell were you protecting?
I can't go to jail.
This is your last chance to tell the truth.
Based on the shocking true story that captured headlines nationwide. Starring Clancy Brown of Pet Sematary 2, Moira Kelly of The Cutting Edge, and Cheryl Lee of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Love, Lies, and Murder.
I just love you to death.
Love, Lies, and Murder.
Clancy
That
Brown,
casting
Pet
is
Sematary
phenomenal.
2.
They had some great casting. Cynthia Nixon.
Right.
Yeah, they had a lot of casting. Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City is actually in the movie, and when we were watching it together, we still really aren't clear on who she was and what her connection to the story was, but she'd pop out every now and again, and
She'd be like in the dad's bed, and we're like, what?
I believe
surprise!
I believe she was a nanny. Anyway, so the storytelling is all over the place. What did they get right? What did they get wrong?
Well, as far as, I mean, look, what is right is wrong, I can't really call, because when we were watching it was really hard to view, but I will say that this is a slam dunk for Lifetime TV, because you had, back in the 90s, people were very over the top when it came to stories of this nature. And in all the elements that came into play, you had this patriarchal figure who was super controlling. You had this familial element, then you had incest, you had just all these things that make for a, I'm sorry, it's the truth though, because when you're at home on a Sunday afternoon, you wanna see a really good Lifetime movie, that is it.
Yeah.
I think
get that incest.
Right, yeah, I mean, incest always gets views. I think that they got right the depiction of the father and how sly and cunning and covert and clever he was.
No, well, sure, they got that right. One thing that they certainly, I mean, he should be grateful for is David Brown is a literally disgusting person inside and outside. And Clancy Brown from Pet Sematary 2, let's go, is an attractive actor who also has this charisma. It's very reminiscent of what we saw in The Craigslist Killer, of the same sort of charm and handsome face of a killer, like the killer that you know, and you kind of want to love him, but you're afraid of him at the same time. And the fact of the matter is that David Brown was so incredibly sick and twisted. He's a 37-year-old who was hanging around with kids. I mean, he was a pedophile, really. Like he was molesting Patty, who would go on to be his wife when she was 11 years old, and then saying that like he was in love with her. I mean, it's just it's all so twisted, and I think they were very generous in their casting of him. But I agree with you, Jason, that as far as the dynamics go, they really were able to show David Brown as like the puppet master of these people in his life.
Well, similar to the Craigslist Killer, I feel like they really humanize him because they don't even mention the fact that he's a pedophile until like later on in the movie where you kind of like see this other side. You see the relationship between him and his daughter, not knowing the backstory of how long it's been going on since she was like 11 years old.
But Lifetime has always done that when they hint to things that they should be super transparent about. But they're never ballsy with anything. They don't ever take risks with these movies, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's movies that they know people kind of have a preconceived idea about, and they don't have to really reach that hard.
No. They lean into those
They lean into what people's preconceived notions are. So for example, the Craigslist Killer, and you heard that he was a med student and he was engaged, and they're like, all right, we're gonna lean into that and ignore some other troubling elements about his life, really. And then same with Amanda Knox. They're like, okay, you guys heard that she was sexy and that she was this free spirit, and so we're gonna have these weird quizzical scenes of her admiring Meredith Kercher, even though from what we know that wasn't a dynamic that was at play. And I think they did that too with David Brown, where it's like, oh, this guy and his younger like wife and the kids. I don't know.
And see, like, so here's the thing, and I think it does a disservice to like what reality is. When you look at David Brown in real life, he's like this disgusting person physically, and you're just like, how could someone like this do all these things and manipulate all these people? So then in the movie, they show him as being like attractive and very charismatic and everything. I think in reality, this just shows how terrible pedophilia and being a predator to young people actually is, and this is the outcome of something like that. When you go after people that are so young, that's when you can manipulate them the worst. And that's how something like this happens in real life, not necessarily because it's an attractive person that's super charismatic.
Yeah, with a lot to bring to the table.
The reality is a lot
They keep
sadder.
talking about his business in the movie, and we were wondering throughout it, like, what is his business? What does he do? And the fact is that he he sure had a business, but he still needed that life insurance money from Linda. He still had to kill someone in order to make a living. He didn't have a lot going for him. He was not a very well-liked guy. David died actually in 2014 behind bars, so he was sentenced. And Cinnamon and Patty, as far as I have found, are out because they were underage. They were juveniles when they were sentenced.
25, I think, right?
Yeah, they got out, and I read that Cinnamon is a widow, but this was from a questionable like blog that I was reading this, so I'm not sure, but she's a widow, but apparently she has 2 kids and lives a very normal life somewhere in Southern California.
Yeah, and when just like a fun little fact, when the judge finally was sentencing David Brown, he compared him to Charles Manson, but said that like you may even be worse than Charles Manson because the difference is that you on the outside you look like a completely normal person.
And I would say I don't think he did. I think maybe
like,
it's just because I've seen his daughter.
In his behavior though, he came off as being like this loving father, whatever. Whereas like someone like Manson is like right from the outside you can tell this guy's a psycho.
Yeah. And also that he was letting his daughter Cinnamon just serve time for a crime that he put her up to and just didn't really seem to care.
He didn't.
He really didn't care at all. There's no remorse.
Right, a remorse, not caring, just total, exactly, Amir, exactly. Those are classic sociopathic traits for people. They don't care, and that's just it. I stand by that. That Lifetime, this was good for Lifetime because of all the elements that came into play. You had mothers, you had daughters, you had marriage, you had family, and people. and murder, of course. And when you, as human beings, those are all things that we have in our lives. You know, we all have families and stuff, so it's very easy to be drawn in to these Lifetime movies, and they know that.
And I also think it's sort of, you think of your own family and you think of your commitment and loyalty and love to protect your family, and so they know that if they show how that's been so warped in the Brown family, that sort of brings you in, like, how could someone do that? You know, how is that even imaginable? And I think that's a huge reason why it caught eyeballs and why people were watching it and why people were tuning in, and fortunately why the justice system was upheld and David Brown was brought to justice for what he did to these young girls. And that's the case of Love. What is the name
Lies
of it?
and Murder.
Love, Lies, and Murder. And that's going to do it for this edition of Campfire episodes on, why can I not remember, the crimes of Lifetime. I should have thought of a better title. I don't know, Lifetime Crimes, who knows? We want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. Had you seen this movie? I'm really interested if people have, because I actually hadn't heard of it before researching this. If you've seen this movie, are you familiar with the case? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more Murder with Friends, and we'll see you next time.